Blockchain has generated a wave of innovation that many historically underrepresented groups are energized to be a part of, and are leading in many ways. With future history on our minds, we're going to discuss how Black founders, investors, and ecosystem builders are influencing different inflection points within the industry. So over to you, Terry.
Thank you, Sadeja. And I'm super excited to be doing this event. I'd love to just maybe start by level setting a little bit. And maybe we can do that by first hearing from each of you. What is blockchain technology in your own words? How would you describe the blockchain? And then how did you come to learn about it? And how did you become sort of active in the space? Maybe Yele, you can kick us off.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Terry. It's great to be here. So I think in the simplest of, words, to me, a blockchain represents a open database that is not controlled by any single person. And for the database itself to be changed, all the people who kind of control or have access to this database have to agree on that change. And there is no restriction on who can, in quotes, control that database, right? So if initially just three of us, maybe you, Leon, and I, we're the ones controlling this database, Sadeja and Mercedes can join and have equal rights to also controlling the database, right? So I think that is the core of what sort of blockchain technology is. And that simple innovation now has tremendous applications that sort of expands and reaches into everything from financial services to art to media to gaming, because again we've seen sort of the role of sort of software and databases in the world. So when you create something that is trustless, it becomes really, really significant.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you discovered the blockchain and what your foray into crypto was?
So I mean, this is the power of the internet, right? So bit of brag about myself. I was in medical school, dropped out, got into tech and taught myself how to program. I learned about crypto online, primarily Twitter. I'd never been to the US or Silicon Valley before, and I was just following a bunch of kind of, I guess, famous tech people who were all talking about blockchain and crypto. And that sort of piqued my interest and curiosity, primarily because I've been a big believer that technology and capital are going to be the biggest sort of drivers of economic transformation in Africa. And you realize that the status quo with governments or corrupt kind of financial and capital institutions, pretty much hamper that kind of growth. And so this idea of a trustless and parallel, financial and economic infrastructure and ecosystem, to me, kind of opens up the potential for true change, right? So that's kind of what has drawn me into crypto, and is pretty much what my whole work is about.
That's awesome. I think we all have gone down the crypto Twitter rabbit hole, so I appreciate that. Mercedes, do you want to jump in? What is the blockchain and what brought you to crypto?
The blockchain, what I think of it as, any new technology, I have always fundamentally asked, what problem is it solving? And I wrote a Twitter thread the other day about a bunch of problems that I think the blockchain is solving. But one of the most important ones is, if the internet gave us, open access to tons of information, the blockchain gives us access to information about who owns what on the internet. And that ownership ledger, an immutable or unchangeable ledger or database of who owns what, is really the really big innovation. There's tons of other things it solves, the principal agent problem, the double spend problem on the internet. But I think it's that idea of, as Yele was saying, it's trustless. We don't need to really question who owns what, because it's very easy to see who owns what. I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes I nerdily am on Etherscan on my Friday nights and just looking at what's been going on. Etherscan is a website where you can see what wallets are buying and sharing what. And I kind of nerd out with that. It's just so cool that you can see that transaction history. And how I got into it, my thesis is all about the economic empowerment of individuals. And so, you heard that I invest in fintech and career mobility and edtech and LATAM. And for me, all of these are about, how do we give wealth and financial access to people who have not previously had some of the forms or products of it. And so that's why I got into cryptos. And as you know, an investor, I'm always thinking about how do communities, especially communities like ours, underserved communities, get access to these new asset classes. And so when I saw what amount of people were taking it up, and especially how the percentage of Black and brown folks that were investing in crypto was higher than population averages, then I was like, okay, this is something that's happening. I need to pay attention to it.
I see the blockchain very much similar to what Yele has mentioned, that this idea that the state of the system can be verified by any individual, so that you don't require a centralized counterparty to understand what the state of the system is. And it sounds relatively abstract when you put it in these terms, but where it becomes very powerful is it means that when you add additional forms of incentives, i.e. Cryptographic assets, you do an action and you get a cryptographic asset, which is scarce because the system tells you how many of them there are, you can incentivize certain behavior. And that's powerful because what it means is that you can develop networks where the users of the network can control the network. And that's why I think blockchain is very interesting, and probably interesting to people on this call, because what it means is instead of having Facebook or Uber in the middle or something and everything going to their servers and equity holders of Facebook and Uber benefiting from the growth of that network, you can actually have a network owned by the users of Facebook or Uber or whatever else it happens to be, and they themselves can benefit from the growth of that network.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what brought you specifically to the blockchain?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and maybe I should say a little bit more about what it is that I do. So I lead the global sales team at a company called Genesis. So there are roughly 20 or so folks in the sales team currently. We run the largest institutional lending desk in crypto in the world, and we run what I think is the largest OTC derivatives desk in crypto as well. So we have offices in London, New York, and Singapore, and we sit as a wholly owned subsidiary in a company called DCG. What got me into this space is that a friend of mine, I used to be a hedge fund manager many years ago, and I decided to leave that career. I decided I no longer had an edge, and a friend of mine in New York kept emailing me saying, have you seen this thing, Ethereum? You should really be paying attention. And I ignored him. And I started paying attention in 2017.
I would love to hear from each of you what you feel the opportunity or the risks are for our communities when we think about the blockchain in general. And we can take this anywhere, whether that is various asset classes, crypto, NFTs, Web3 in general. I would just love to hear, like, what do you all think about the intersection of people of color and Black folks in particular, Happy Black History Month, and the blockchain?
Yeah, happy Black History Month. That I'll start. You know, that I think there's so many interesting things that I'm seeing with people of color and Black folk in this space. There was that Harris and poll, Harris and something poll or survey that showed basically out of people who've invested in crypto, 30% of Black investors have invested in crypto. So if you're already an investor. And that was a really surprising stat to me when I saw it last year. I think I saw it in the summer of 2021. And we know Black folk are 13% of the US. And so that means we're over indexing on buying crypto as investors. And you know why this is, I think there's a lot of interesting things about the separation of money and state, having a system that is trustless, a system where we can see the immutable ledger and know where it's at. And so I think that one, you know, the stats are there, we're already doing it. Two, what's the opportunity? Now, I don't think necessarily on the main kind of, stage of crypto that Black folk are getting all of their shine for the contributions that they're doing in the space. There's a lot of artists that have been contributing to NFT projects. There's founders, there's VCs, but I'm not actually seeing even though we over index in our purchases of crypto, I'm not seeing an over representation or even a population average representation of kind of like top news and top funded projects in the space. So I think that's a bit of a problem. And then, the third thing I think about this is when you think about, everyone talks about how are we going to bring, the masses into Web3. And the main way that it's being done is through sports. Look at FTX and crypto.com buying out stadiums. Look at how they're buying the, Super Bowl ads, Coinbase, FTX. They bought these, humongously expensive Super Bowl ads. Everyone knows that the way into mass America is through entertainment and through sports. And where have Black people always over-indexed is in entertainment and sports. And so I think there is actually a large opportunity here, but we need to organize and we need to be aware of who else is in the space. It took me 6 months to even figure out what other Black people were working on crypto after I had already been spending time in the space, and to be able to get into the Telegram groups and whatnot. And, why was that? So I think we just need some more organization, because we're perfectly positioned to play a big role in this new sector.
Yele, I see you nodding your head. What are you thinking?
No, I mean, that was just an amazing response by Mercedes. Just spot on all around. So when I started working in crypto full time was around 2017. I joined Binance, and I remember that I was the first African hire at Binance, and like the only kind of Black person that was sort of, very close to the A team or like executive team at the, at Binance at the time. And, at all the events I went to, I just didn't like meet or see like anyone. Obviously, like I was on the continent, so yes, there was a little bit of an ecosystem, and if you're in Africa, everyone is like Black. But anytime I came to the US or I was going to like these conferences, like it felt very lonely, right? And I think is a lot more recently where I think, I'm not sure if people are in CBEE, but that's a group that someone called Eric Kahn from Audacity put together. And I was just surprised and shocked by like, wow, like, okay, there are actually like a lot of really cool Black people doing like awesome stuff in crypto. And, that was the first kind of like digital safe space where like, I was like, yo, there are like other people like me really doing awesome stuff, right? So I think with Mercedes' point on like organization and just like better discovery is probably one of the most important things that we need to do. I remember when I was raising for Nestcoin, I was literally trying to find like Black people to invest in Nestcoin. I think we did quite well in terms of like the index of who's on our cap table, but it's definitely something that like I think about a lot, right? I think another key element is if people make money from crypto, they become like the biggest advocates of like crypto itself, right? So it's like this inherent viral kind of word of mouth type of loop, which for me was very important in terms of having sort of Black representation on my cap table. And then I think like, again, if we think about like the role of like culture and sort of entertainment and sort of just how powerful like Black is when it comes to media, entertainment, and sports, and the fact that even in crypto, a lot of the things that are driving like mainstream awareness and conversation with like NFTs and, that is a huge opportunity for us to sort of be a little bit more prominent, right? So it really is about like saying, if you think about like what happened with like media and some of the early phases, a lot of people who had like great records or put out like good content actually didn't monetize or like own the IP. So I think like now we're in this new evolution whereby the internet actually killed the business model of media and entertainment, right? As things move digital. I think like what crypto does right now is that it's creating a internet native or digital native business model, right? Whereby like creators, athletes, people of color can actually own their IP and sort of like monetize directly from their audience. So it's going to be super, super exciting because I think like, as long as we can, as long as there's like a certain level of organization and sort of like knowledge sharing, then, it's a potentially very powerful, ecosystem that can really do a lot of awesome stuff.
I really appreciated Mercedes and Yele's answer. I just want to look at it from another angle. So I totally get why on the retail side, it's very attractive to Black consumers to look at crypto assets to invest in. But I do want to say that from those who are working in the space and those who aren't necessarily founders like Yele here, I think the real fundamental thing for me, and this is which crypto and blockchain offers, is that it offers a change to existing power structures. So what that means is that I used to work in traditional finance and have a long career there. Crypto does enable you to get involved in a space where your network, which school you went to, is not super important. Having a bunch of money in your bank account, especially in the early days, and even now, is not super important. Your class and race and so forth. Like, this is a relatively this is a new paradigm that's been created in a very, very short period of time. And so you can get access to very, very senior levels. Like, if you're at an investment bank, if you're at JP Morgan, you can't go and talk to Jamie Dimon. So I think that what crypto enables is a complete reordering of the normal power structures.
One thing that's really compelling to me that's coming up as you all are speaking is just this idea of democratizing access. And part of that is enabled by the blockchain in that it's trustless, in that it is open and public, in that there's a lot of information. I think you mentioned, Leon, you can become an expert if you just spend all of your time learning as much as possible. I would love to hear a little bit more about this idea of why it's really important to create access, and specifically for crypto and for blockchain. I think, Yele, I would love to hear from you. Nestcoin's mission is to democratizing access to economic opportunity for everyday people in the frontier markets. So this is something that you live and breathe. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so I think the way I think about crypto is that, there's this saying that we say a lot on the continent, which is talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not, right? So there's a concept of the geographical lottery, that just because you're born in, let's say, the US or Europe, you're already significantly better off than someone that is born in Nigeria, right? Or in Ghana or in Zimbabwe. I'm very lucky that I had the opportunity to go to the UK, and I was in medical school, and I got exposed to the internet very early. Before the internet came to Africa, your world was literally what was in front of you, right? So there was literally the quality of education that you have. There's this video that went viral a few days ago, where a young student in a well-known university was like, okay, the university is closed. That's fine. We don't even want to be in uni because we're learning everything online. And everyone was just like, oh my God, this is so true, right? So what the internet has done for Africans is it's kind of exposed us to kind of what is going on in the rest of the world, and you can learn a lot of things. But that sort of information exposure doesn't necessarily translate to financial exposure, right? So if you're in an African country, let's say you're in Ghana or Nigeria or Zimbabwe, and you are earning the equivalent of $100 5 years ago, just because of inflation, if you're earning the same amount of money, you are now earning about $30, right? So you've literally lost 70% of your net worth by just holding the local currency. Now, when you can have access to Bitcoin or even stable coins, where you're holding US dollar, USD on the blockchain, that is tremendous, right? So we ran a survey recently and found that the vast majority of remote workers in Africa do not convert whatever they earn into their local currency, right? So all of just that particular use case alone kind of shows this idea of democratizing access to, better financial or, better forms of money. Over the next kind of 25 years, there are going to be 2.5 billion people that are going to be born, right? More than half of them are going to come from the continent of Africa, right? And so with China, the internet and China kind of created this economic superpower. But you have one country, one currency. In Africa, we have 54 countries, 40 plus currencies, 270 sort of different types of payment methods. When you then have something like Bitcoin or sort of like, even non-fiat backed stable coins, you have the potential to create like a unified economic a unified economy across the continent. And then because there's a transition from sort of manufacturing to knowledge work, and literally again, talent is even distributable, opportunity is not. Africa now has the potential to really have a huge impact and no longer be seen as kind of like this backwater, part of the global economy. So for me, and the vast majority of people that like work at Nestcoin or like we've invested in, like that is our whole mission, which is like, how do we ensure and democratize like access to economic opportunities, whereby your location doesn't determine kind of like the quality of life that you can have. And like that vision resonates with a lot of like young Africans on the continent, including myself.
Wow, that's really powerful. And it makes me think about the beauty of a distributed ledger is that it is literally a technological advancement for which there are unlimited applications. And depending on where you are, how you live, what your background is, the potential solutions and applications for that are far and wide. And so that's really powerful. Okay, so I have a couple more questions, but I also want to make sure that I'm getting questions from the audience. So feel free again to drop in the chat any questions that you have. And everyone here will be happy to jump in. One thing that I want to make sure that we talk about are trends in general and some of the things that we're just seeing in this space that are really exciting to us. This is something that Mercedes and I talk about a lot as investors. We spend a lot of time with a really sort of horizontal view of the entire space. So maybe Mercedes, if you want to jump in, I know you've done a handful of crypto and Web3 investments recently. What are some of the trends that you're seeing? What are put us on? What should we be paying attention to?
The area I had been deep diving on most recently was DAO tooling, and thinking about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. They're these networks of individuals that are formed on chain that are able to vote on chain. They're able to pool assets together on chain and really run a crypto native community. They work really well for hobbies, collective investment groups, things like that. There's ones that are focused on the climate. And so I've been doing a deep dive to see, okay, well, what are the tools that are serving them? I think it's actually still pretty early days is what I kind of found from my deep dive there, but I think it is going to be a future organization structure that will be very important, similar to how companies and corporations or how startups were formed in the past. And it sounds like in the past they're still being formed that way. But I think DAOs are going to be a new structure for how we think about forming groups around new ideas.
Leon, Mercedes, Yele, thank you all so much for taking the time. Obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we could discuss, but also that's yet to come in the next couple of years when it